Alright, what's up everybody? Back again, fourth video on the channel. So today what we're going to be talking about is a book that I read years ago, probably one of the most important books that I read for self-improvement. It's a pretty famous book, you guys might have heard of it. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. There you go, there you go. So I picked this book up years ago, like I was in high school. I'm 23 now for reference, but I was in high school back then, even like big on this self-improvement stuff, and something I always wanted to get better with was my social skills, right? Like I was pretty well known because of playing football for my high school. Like, so a lot of people knew who I was, but I wasn't the most sociable guy. I wasn't the most outgoing guy, and a lot of that was just because I didn't know how to like properly behave and like proper social dynamics. So reading this book was one of those things that really changed the game for me. And it's not like, it doesn't teach you how to like kick people's ass to make them like you, right? Like it gives you real scenarios and real life situations, and even like examples from like famous presidents back in the day, and like how they use these same principles to socially conduct themselves. And so it was a real game changer for me socially. It changed my life, and I'm going to highlight for you guys some of the most important lessons I learned from this book. So let's start with number one. All right, so lesson number one is going to be don't criticize or condemn people. Basically, and I'm sure you guys know this, like no one likes to think they're wrong, right? No one wants to think that their way of thinking is wrong or the way they do something is wrong, and no one wants to hear it either, like from you. Like no one wants to hear you telling them, oh, you did this wrong, you did that. Like all it's going to do is turn people off to your idea and only drive them more into their way of thinking. So what Dale Carnegie talks about in the book is never criticize or condemn. Basically what he does is he creates this thing, it's kind of like a criticism sandwich, if you will. He basically says when you're trying to correct someone's behavior or correct someone's way of thinking and get them to see your point of view, it's best to layer criticism between two compliments. So I'm trying to think of an example I can give for you guys, but I don't know, maybe, but basically the idea is like, you want to go into it saying like, hey, listen, you're doing a really good job of X, right? And so you give them that compliment, you know, they're going to be like, oh, thanks, blah, blah, blah. And then you tell them, you know, but I think with Y, it would be better if you do it this way. And then you layer off the criticism with a final compliment. And then you say, so yeah, I think if you give that a try, it's only going to help you. You know, like I said, you're doing a great job with X, you're doing a great job over here at Z. And then you try to fix that situation with Y. It can be applied to any situation, anytime you're trying to help somebody and you don't want to just give them straight criticism because you know that's going to turn them off to your way of thinking. Try to go for that criticism sandwich, if you will, that Dale Carnegie talks about. Let's go on to rule number two. Be interested in them first. So what that means is it kind of touches on how people are inherently self-centered, right? Like at the end of the day, everyone's kind of worried about them and their thing and what they're doing. I mean, it's true. Like, you and I are the same way too, right? It's just, it's part of being human. So what Dale Carnegie talks about in the book is be interested in them first if you want them to be interested in you. So he touches on try to talk to someone and find something that they're very interested in that you also care about too, right? Because you don't want your interest to come off as insincere, because then they're just going to be like, oh, he's just trying to fake it to get something out of me, right? No, you want to find like a common ground with somebody, something that they're interested in, and then you go all in on that. You ask them questions. You don't hound them, right? But you ask them questions. You tell them, you know, like, hey, it's really cool that you're, you know, into blah, blah, blah. You know, I have experience. And that's how you start conversation, right? And that's how you make a friend. Once you show that you're interested in them, by default, they're going to become interested in you, right? Because people like people that like them. You know, there's a story in the book that he tells where President Theodore Roosevelt, if he had a big meeting with, say, another leader, he would study them the night before and learn about their interests. And then what he would do is he would go into that meeting, and before they even talked anything, you know, political, he would say like, oh, hey, you know, I heard you're really interested in boating, like, and then he would just recite all that research he learned the night before what does that do? It opens up people to you, right? Now this guy's like, oh, hey, Teddy Roosevelt, he's just like me. That's how you win people to your way of thinking, right? Now they're um, under your mind frame, and then you can kind of, wiggle your way in there and tell them things that you want to get done, and they're going to be more receptive to it. So if you want people to like you, to be interested in you, you got to be interested in them first. That's rule number 2. Let's go on to rule number 3. Okay, so rule number 3, and this is maybe like one of the low-key biggest ones, is to say yes right away. What I'm talking about is get the other person to say yes right away, right? When you're trying to get someone to see your point of view, to align with your way of thinking, you want them to say yes to you early in the conversation. So Socrates came up with this. It's known as the Socratic method. And essentially what it is you find common ground early. So say you're in a disagreement with someone and you want them to kind of see things from your perspective. Well, you can be like, hey, we both want, I should have came up with some good examples for you, but basically you say like, hey, you find something that you'd agree with the other person. You say, well, hey, we're both trying to get this grand scheme of things done, right? The person would be like, yes. And it would be more beneficial if we do that. And then you give another example, they'd be like, yes. So now you're getting some yeses under the belt. So what that does is that opens them up. They start to think like, okay, they do see where I'm coming from. Like they think that you're understanding their point of view when really you're just getting them to be under, I don't want to use the word manipulation, right? But basically you're getting them to embrace your point of view. And so what getting a few yeses early on does is softens them up. And then when you kind of get back to your main point and you're like, so yeah, we all agreed here and this is why I think this is the best way to solve it, you have a much higher chance of getting them to finally say yes to your overall point. And it's a great tactic for business, it's a great tactic for friendships, for anything. That's getting people to say yes right off the bat. That's rule number 3. You can look up the Socratic method if you're more interested in this stuff, and they do a great job of explaining that too. But let's go on to rule number 4. Okay, rule number 4, short and sweet one. When you're wrong, admit it first. Pretty simple, guys, right? Like, everyone's going to be wrong in life. You don't have all the answers. You're going to catch yourself being wrong. And in those moments, what you need to do is you need to own up to it before someone can get on top of you for it. So basically, the second you find yourself in the wrong, raise your hand, be enthusiastic with admitting like, hey, I was wrong, explain yourself, fully admit to it. And what that's going to do is it's going to kind of get people to be like, okay, I can trust this guy, right? Like, he doesn't have a big head. He's not, like, not being afraid to admit you're wrong is such a amazing trait that very few people have, especially in today's world. So I'm telling you, you want to win people to your way of thinking, you want to get people to like you. When you make those inevitable mistakes, just admit you're wrong, let them know right away, and it's the quickest way to breeze by things, right? Like, otherwise, people are going to catch you being wrong, they're going to hound you about it, and just get it out of the way real quick. That's rule number 4. When wrong, admit it. Okay, rule number 5 is empowering through encouragement. So this one to me was kind of common knowledge, but I guess for a lot of people maybe it isn't. When you're trying to lead somebody, when you're trying to teach something to someone, you never want to go about it in a disciplinary fashion. You want to always go about it through encouragement. So to me this was always obvious, right? So I used to play football, right? I was a running back, and I remember one time in high school I fumbled, right? And one of my coaches screamed at me. He was like, hold on to the effing ball, like screaming at me, you know what I mean? And it's like, man, I know I need to hold on to the ball. Like, I'm not stupid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that kind of stuff just doesn't help. You screaming at me. Like, I already fumbled. It already happened. Like, you think I did it on purpose? That kind of, and I know, like, he's just trying to get the best out of me, but that kind of coaching never works. Then I had another coach who was just like, listen, forget about it, right? Like, you've had 100 runs and you haven't fumbled the ball. Like, it happened. Let it go. Next play. Like, that's the kind of stuff that empowers you, right? It makes you go like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I have had all these great plays where I haven't fumbled. Like, I can't let this one thing get to me. And so that's just a way to go about encouraging people, right? Is through empowerment. You let them know like, hey, you just and it's not like cheap motivation. It's being genuine. It's saying like, you know, you can do this, and maybe you give them a reason, X, Y, Z. Like I said, like that coach did for me. Told me, you know, you've had hundreds of runs and you haven't fumbled. One fumble happened. You know, if you're trying to empower someone, you can tell them like, hey, look, you've made it this far. You know, there's no reason why you can't go, you know, to this hill. So never be that guy who's like, you know, trying to build someone up by putting them down. That's just like a weird way to go about things. And that person, like, very rarely is ever gonna be like, oh yeah, like, I loved when this guy was screaming at me and roasting me. Like, like, I'm so thankful for that. You know, sometimes it happens, but I'm telling you, most of the time people are gonna look back and be and like remember the people that helped them on the journey, that were kind to them and that encouraged them to keep going. So that's lesson number 5, rule number 5 from Dale Carnegie. Again, the book is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm gonna put a link in the description for any of you who want to purchase the book. Again, I strongly recommend it. Like, it changed the game for me socially. There's a lot of other rules in this book too that I didn't go over in this video. So there's plenty more to learn. The examples are great. There's some stories he tells about like Abraham Lincoln in here. So it's a really great book. I've read it 3 times already, just because the lessons are that important. Sometimes you just need that reminder, like, oh yeah. And I'm telling you, man, it gets you out of your shell. It just teaches you how to interact on a higher level. I can't recommend it enough. I can't recommend reading enough. Like, I'm probably going to do a lot of these videos on the channel where I tell you guys books that I read and how they've helped me, because like that's where the knowledge comes from, right? Like, you gotta learn this somehow, and so I learned it through reading. So yeah, link in the description if you want this book. Highly recommend it. But otherwise, try to, you know, hone in on some of these rules. Try to instill them in your own life. And yeah, you guys like this content, I really appreciate subscribing, liking the video, share it with somebody that you think it can help, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.